I'm from Central California, and my family are really big outdoorsmen, hunters, fishermen, so I'm a big hunter myself.
That meant that Kyra Gangbin did a lot of sitting around waiting for the bird they were hunting to fly past.
And you don't often shoot something, but you're just making lots of observations about nature.
Which convinced her to study wildlife biology at Fresno State University, where she joined a lab studying an endangered lizard.
And it was through tracking blunt-nosed leopard lizards that I got to hold my first horned lizard. And I cannot explain to you what that moment was like, holding my first horned lizard. It was obviously life-changing.
Kyra was obsessed with the tiny creatures that could fit into the palm of your hand.
They just have this personality. They look so unique.
So she started hunting for a school where she could focus her graduate studies on reptiles, especially horned lizards, or as some call them, horned toads. That's when her mom spotted a Facebook post from the Fort Worth Zoo in Texas celebrating their 100th baby horned lizard released into the wild.
And so I looked at the post and I said, you know what, I bet you there's a school associated with this. And so I did some background reading, and that's how I found TCU, and that's how I ended up here.
Kyra isn't just learning about her reptile crush, she's working to protect them from extinction.
This is the Big Stories Podcast, where we tell the amazing and inspiring stories from across the Big 12 Conference.
I'm your host, Cleon Wall. While the Big Stories team was searching for a compelling story out of TCU, we found something we couldn't ignore. The horned frogs were trying to save real-life horned lizards. It felt almost too perfect. In this episode, we'll explore how they're working to bring these unique reptiles back in large numbers and why that mission hasn't been easy.
You know, trying to get them past that first year, that's one of the current things we're working on.
But before we dive in, we need to take a quick step back for a little history lesson. In 1897, Texas Christian University didn't exist, at least not by that name. Back then, it was called Adran Christian University, and it was located in Waco, Texas. The football team was preparing for only its second season when students released their very first Horned Frog yearbook. The name wasn't random either. It was inspired by the football team's run-ins with the local wildlife.
The football field down in Waco apparently had just horned lizards all over it.
When I talked with TCU biology professor Dean Williams, I told him I was a bit puzzled. The animals looked like a lizard, and scientifically speaking, they are lizards. So why does it sometimes go by another name?
Colloquially, here in Texas, they'd be called horny toads. And it's because they kind of have a toad-like body shape.
So where did the name horned frog come from?
The story behind that, I've heard, different things, but one was horny toad was maybe a little too risque, and so why not call them horned frogs?
No matter the name, the species stands out. The diminutive beasts are native only to North America and have a pretty unusual way of defending themselves.
They can squirt blood from a sinus behind the eye, and this is the only lizard species that does that. And so if something like a coyote is attacking them, they will squirt that blood. And if it gets in the coyote's mouth, the coyote will just leave the horned lizard alone.
The strategy doesn't work on all predators. Against snakes, they puff themselves up to look bigger. When birds are around, they disappear into their surroundings. And the way horned lizards drink water is one of the coolest things they do.
It's called rain harvesting, and it turns out they have these little nano channels that run between their scales. And when it rains, they'll go out in the rain and they'll kind of hunch over like this so that the rain hits them on the back. That water gets soaked into those little nano channels, and all those channels run towards the mouth of the lizard.
For decades, these animals roamed all across the Lone Star State. Here again is TCU doctoral student Kyra Gangbin.
Anytime I give my presentation on horned lizards, somebody will come up to me and say, you know, when I was a little kid, I used to see horned lizard all the time, and this is how I would play with them. I would dress them up as dolls. I would collect 5-gallon buckets full of them. I would put a leash on them and take them for walks. There's so many fun stories that people used to have.
But since the 1960s, these horned lizards have slowly been disappearing from Texas.
Probably the big problem is that they've just lost a lot of habitat. So if you look at the places in Texas where they've disappeared, it's highly urbanized, lots of roads. The habitat that they need has just disappeared. The other problem is invasive red fire ants. Fire ants will displace the native ants that they need for food.
In 2009, Dean got a call from Texas Parks and Wildlife asking if he'd be interested in a project called Let Lizards Live. Okay, that's not the official name, but that's what I would have called it since I'm a sucker for alliteration. The project's idea was simple but ambitious. Raise horned lizards in zoos, then reintroduce them into parts of Texas where they'd disappeared. Part of Dean's role was to study the critters' genetic makeup, and his lab discovered that not all horned toads are the same.
They're different between these different ecoregions. And what we found was, yes, there are three major partitions in Texas. So when you reintroduce something, ideally you want to put it back into, the type of habitat and area that it came from originally. We're making sure that the zoos only breed lizards from that northern area, and then they're being released into the northern area. And then the San Antonio Zoo is only doing lizards from the southern area and releasing them into the southern area.
Once they knew where to release the small reptiles, it sounded simple. Just put them back into the wild. It turned out to be anything but easy.
TPW, for instance, originally tried to just release adults, and adults did okay, but they normally only live probably 2 years in the wild, maybe 3.
And that's because snakes find the larger lizards to be a tasty treat.
And so, it became clear you could just never release enough. And so that's why we switched then to, releasing hatchlings.
Can you imagine trying to track tiny, adorable baby lizards covered in little horns? That's Kyra's challenge. To get started, she gets help attaching small radio frequency identification tags to them so she can find them again later.
It looks almost like a small strip of aluminum foil. So we take those and we just super glue those onto the back of the hatchlings.
As the lizards grow, they can shed those tags, and it's up to Kyra and others to hunt them down.
Say I'm driving around, I see a horned lizard, I will jump out of the UTV, and I can just pounce on top of them. It's really comical to watch me out there. And then as soon as I have them in hand, they might squirm a little bit, but eventually they kind of just sit there in your hand like a pet.
That's when she attaches a bigger tracking device the animals can't shed. By the way, have you ever named any of the lizards at all that you release?
I feel like every time I name the lizards, they end up dying. So I've made it a rule that I will not name them. I call them by their numbers, but anytime there's like a guest that comes out with me, I'll let them name the lizards.
Honestly, Kyra could probably name all the horned lizards at Mason Mountain Wildlife Management Area. She spent months living on site getting to know them up close, and her work centers on 3 big projects. First, where do they like to nest?
So we're still trying to figure it out. There was a lot of variations, but what seemed pretty consistent is they all liked to nest around some kind of structure. So underneath a bush, sometimes underneath a prickly pear cactus. I'm really excited to look at this data. I haven't analyzed it all yet, but I think these horned lizards also put their babies in spots that have a higher abundance of native ants.
Speaking of ants, Kyra's second project is all about figuring out how to poison invasive fire ants without killing off the other ants horned lizards like to eat. And her method starts with something simple: hot dogs.
If there's a fire ant there, then we'll poison the hot dog.
The ant carries the toxin back to the colony, passes it along to the queen, and just like that, no more fire ants. It's not an easy or effective process. Finally, project number 3, figuring out why so many horned lizards released by zoos don't survive brumation.
Brumation is basically hibernation for reptiles. And the reason we're studying that is because in captive environments, like at the zoo, the number one time point where lizards die is through brumation, which is strange because in the wild, it seems like brumation is the point in which the lizards have the highest survival. So there's this mismatch. So if we can understand what the lizards are doing in the wild, brumating, we can apply that to the captive environments.
There's a long road ahead before the horned lizard is no longer considered threatened in Texas, but Kyra is optimistic, thanks to everything they've learned along the way.
Last year, we released 900 baby lizards at Mason Mountain. And by releasing these lizards at one location, we're obviously not changing the world. But the idea is if we, over these next couple years, can figure out the best way to release horned lizards and the best methods, the right locations, the right amount of ants that need to be present, things like that, then we can start taking this project to private lands.
And that's what the ranchers and residents want. More of the spiky beasts on their land. Maybe it's altruism, maybe it's sentiment. Probably a little of both.
I wouldn't say that they are, what you might call like a keystone species or something like that, that if you remove them, a bunch of bad stuff happens. Horned lizards, it's more that they're a unique type of species that's only found in North America. And they also have a very, a very strong kind of cultural significance. They were one of the first animals that a lot of kids played with out in their yard.
Honestly, just by talking about horned lizards, by having this project going, by me going to conferences and festivals and schools and talking about these lizards, I am encouraging a whole new generation of people who have never seen a horned lizard to start loving these lizards and to start being interested in conservation.
Strong, resilient, and unique. According to TCU's website, those 3 words describe both its students and its horned frog mascot. And Kyra couldn't agree more.
As a mascot, I think that they can look very fierce and intimidating with their horns, but they're actually really docile. And in some ways, I kind of wonder if that's what TCU is like. We're really fierce and sharp in some ways, like for our sports, we're putting our heart and soul into it. But in other ways, we're more docile. We're also just sitting here studying, doing our academics.
Thanks to Brandon Thorpe for his contributions to writing and producing this episode. Music and sound design was provided by Jimmy Call and the BYU Radio post-production team. Check out all of our big stories wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be back soon with more tales from around the Big 12. Big Stories is a production of BYU Radio.